simple game. Would you rather? Would you rather? It's a simple game. Would you rather run into an alien or Bigfoot? Simple answer for me, neither. I'm not going to play the game, neither. I don't want to run into an alien or Bigfoot, really. Doesn't mean they don't exist. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, whatever. I don't want to run into them, okay? All right, number 2. Would you rather be given $10 today or $100 in a week? Would you rather have $10 today be given to you or $100 given to you in a week? That one's pretty easy for me. I have lived times in my life where I would be desperate for that $10, and sometimes context matters. I don't carry cash. I'm in a place that needs cash. Give me $10 because I need it right now. But $100 in a week would be way better for me than 10 today, and I have no problems saying that, right? All right, number 3. Would you rather have a good day today or tomorrow? Would you rather today be a good day or tomorrow be a good day? Both. I'm okay with just flat out saying there's no reason why both days can't be okay, right? Would you rather? I don't know where you came down on those, but I've answered those from where I came down on them. That's a pretty simple game. That's the game, would you rather. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Preparing for Sunday, where you and I take a look together at the upcoming Sunday's scripture text. This is for Sunday, March 24th, 2024. We're creeping closer to that eclipse that's coming. We will designate this as Palm sort of / Passion Sunday. We'll do both. We'll observe it as Palm Sunday for the first third or so of the service, and then it will pivot over and we'll observe this as Passion Sunday, which I have explained often why I do that. I want to be able to enter into the full cost that God undertook for us in the person of Jesus, and you can only do that by observing this as Passion Sunday. This gospel text for this week, often I'm like, pause this and read it. I'm not sure a pause will hold long enough to read all this. The gospel text for this week is Mark chapter 14, verse 1 through 15, verse 47. So 2 long chapters. You may pause this and read it. I don't have any problems. I'd be impressed if you did. The reading is always long on Passion Sunday, and what it wants to do is tell the whole story of Jesus in the garden, upper room, arrest, punishment, crucifixion, and being put into the tomb. The whole story. I have cut the text significantly. It's still really long Sunday, but I've cut out basically the whole 15th chapter. We're just going to read the 14th. But here, I need to tell you, the lectionary wants us to read 14:1 through 15:47. I'm probably not going out on a limb to say that's got to be the longest reading of the whole year. And by now, you have probably seen, because I'm saying Mark, it's in the Gospel of Mark, that we've pivoted back now. The lectionary took us from Mark early in Lent into John for the last couple weeks, and now we're pivoting back into Mark. That move is what makes up really the strongest part of the theme or the story or the idea that I'm going to talk about in preparing, and that's going to influence me for Sunday. We are leaping, in this case, even though we're in the same lectionary year, it's year B, we're leaping from John to Mark. In John chapter 3, which we read in worship a couple of weeks ago, Jesus says, just as the snake was lifted up, I'm going to be lifted up. And so John gives us a certain flavor of Jesus' approach to his crucifixion. This is from John 12, which we just read last Sunday. And I'm going to sort of emphasize some parts of this, of the last week's lectionary reading. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. And so the hour has come, I'm going to be glorified. And that's Jesus speaking. And he's talking about his own death. Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it. Those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. You must follow me. Now my soul is troubled. And that's a sort of sarcastic way that Jesus is talking. And what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, that's the punchline there. No, it's for this reason that I came to this hour. This hour is why I have come amongst you. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice says, I have glorified it. The crowd gets confused. They say, what was that voice? And Jesus says, I already knew what that was all about. That voice was for your sake, not for mine. Now I am lifted up from the earth and will draw all people to myself. That's Jesus in John talking about his crucifixion, and it's his glory, and it's his purpose, it's his mission. He has come from heaven in the Gospel of John to hand eternal life over this grace-filled love, salvation, love, presence of God in Jesus' actions. And John clearly depicts Jesus as dedicated to handing that over to us. Mark, which we're falling back into this week in a long reading, this gives us this pretty clear and hits very hard on the brokenness of humanity. John hits on how clear and dedicated to his mission Jesus is. Mark hits on how confused we are and how in need of God we are. Would you rather have John or Mark? Would you rather read from John or read from Mark? Would you rather hear how glorious Jesus is, or would you rather have it depicted pretty clearly how confused I can be and you can be? The answer to that, like the answer to Good Day Today or Good Day Tomorrow, is yes. We want both of those stories. So the pivot between John and Mark, although they are, as far away as East is from West, even though there's a big divide between the two of them, we want both of them. We want the story of who Jesus is. We want the story of who we are. We want what it looks like for those two things to meet, for God to redeem us, to be in relationship with us. So we're pivoting now between John and Mark. We want both sides of the story, but it's really clear in preparing for Sunday and hearing this as Passion Sunday that we're moving off of the action of God, and now we're going to talk about what it's like to be human. So you may want to pause this and read Mark 1:14, 1 through 15:47. Go for it if you'd like. If you don't want to pause it, I'm going to remind you, in worship we're only going to read the 14th chapter. That's all the text for today, once we get there from the procession. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this other than to highlight a few pieces of it to really try to draw out what I'm talking to you about as Mark's humanness. All right? So one of the characters, I'm going to hit a list of characters here in that reading. One of the characters in it is Judas. So part of the story of Jesus is to tell this sort of backstory or B story, like this character of Judas who fits into the story of Jesus. And Judas, as you know, is the disciple that has trouble with Jesus and then ultimately betrays him. In Luke and in John, which are both written after Mark, there is the story of Judas. Judas appears in all of the Gospels, but in Luke and John, they go out of their way to say the devil made him do it. The devil entered into him. The devil subsumed him, and it's the devil who's doing this to Jesus. In Matthew, we get a distinct part of the story that we don't get in other places, and there we get that they give money to Judas. That Judas, we don't get the devil in Matthew, but we get the idea that money buys his traitor behavior. In Mark, we just get Judas. We just get the broken Judas motivated by his confusion to betray Jesus. There's no supplanting by the devil. There's no money making him do it. There's just this confused Judas. That is this Mark idea that humans are confused and broken. And now in Lent, we're setting that in juxtaposition to Jesus who has come in his glory. Broken humans, glory Jesus, both. We want both of these. We want to know who Jesus is and what he offers us, and we want to know where we're stuck and what he's offering to save us from. And that's what you get when the lectionary does this pivot between Mark to John and back now to Mark. And I'm emphasizing it here because the theme of the sermon is going to go from despair last week and how God calls us into loving in the face of despair, to sort of just telling you how messed up we are. You know, instead of trying to emphasize God's work in a despairing world, which I tried to do last week, we're going to pivot now because we're in Mark, and it's going to be pretty heavy. Just like look at this, man. This is bad. I'll also pull out the character Peter, and I could do this with lots of things here in Mark, but I'm sort of cherry picking a little bit. Mark has a way of talking about Peter that's a little bit different than the other Gospels. In all of the synoptics, Peter behaves the way he does. In this part of the story, we get the rooster and the betrayal, but Mark tells it in a specific way. When Jesus looks at him and says, "You're going to betray me," there's only two. He talks about two rooster crows, which is a little different. He says, "Today." He's like, there isn't even going to be a gap of time. And Mark inserts the word "today" that the other synoptics take out. You're going to do this in like a couple minutes. You know, I'm exaggerating, but like today, you're going to do this. In Mark, we get the story of Peter, who is warming himself by a fire, is approached by someone who says, "Weren't you one of his disciples?" That's in this big long reading. And Jesus is under fire, right? He's currently being persecuted. He's under fire from Pilate, while Peter is comfortable next to a fire. So there's that juxtaposition that's a little different than how John says it. And we get Peter saying, "I don't know him, I don't know him, I don't know him." And boy, that has to be condemning, guys. You know, for Peter to have heard the story, seen the stuff, and then to say, "I don't know him," it's supposed to say, you know, kind of, hey, have you ever done that? Have you ever said about Jesus, "I don't know him," when you should have said, you know, something that proclaimed his power? All right. I'll also pull out the other disciples in places here. It says clearly don't know how to answer him. Jesus asked them questions before he's pulled away, before he's arrested, and the text says didn't know how to answer him. They did not know what to say. We're all the way at the end of the story. Mark is emphasizing that they've been with Jesus all this time, and they don't even have a guess as to what to say here. Jesus, who this story is ultimately about, in Mark behaves differently than we get the picture of in John. In Mark, there is particular emphasis, more than any of the Gospels, about his silence in front of Pilate, his silence in front of his accusers. John has Jesus saying, "This is the hour that I came for." It has him interacting with Pilate, with what is truth, and they're being philosophical. Mark says that Jesus was silent. The juxtaposition of those two things, if you gotta see it. They're just so different. What he's saying and doing couldn't be different. And which of these do you like better? Yes, you like them both. You like the idea that Jesus has come for his glory, but you like the idea too that he's human and therefore can connect to our own crazy, sinful stuff, right? Mark goes out of his way to make the punishment harsher. There's guards here that aren't there in other parts of the story. There's punishments doled out to Jesus, and torture or physical violence inflicted on him that is not inflicted on him elsewhere. Mark gets you a little harder. If you remember that sort of now older, aging movie, The Passion of the Christ, that people were like, "I can't sit through this." In some ways, it's got some Mark things with that, rougher, some more severe punishment. All right. Mark goes further into Barabbas. There's a character I'll touch on. I'll actually touch on Barabbas, I think, some in the sermon too, briefly, like a sentence or two. Barabbas has more about him in Mark than any of the other Gospels. He appears in all three of the synoptics, that name, but only Mark spends as much time and goes into as much detail. And again, Barabbas becomes a character here that tells us about human proclivity and the problem with it. The detail that Mark goes into is about Barabbas' penchant for revolting. It's about him as a revolutionary. He's revolted, and Mark wants to point that out, that he's in custody because he's a revolutionary, and then he's trying to set that in juxtaposition to silent, not revolting Jesus. Hey, that's a big one. You know, we like to think that Jesus is either loves everybody or is this radical revolutionary. The truth is yes. It's both of those things. Because Jesus is looking for his glory and silent, we can't rectify all this. If we were able to rectify it, we wouldn't need the story. We wouldn't need God caring for us. We can't rectify all this story. We sit in this paradox because sitting in the paradox is confusing, and to be fixed from our confusion, we need Jesus. That's the glory of why he comes, to fix the brokenness. You need the glory, you need the brokenness, you have to have both. John and Mark couldn't figure out how to tell both really well, so they pivot. So the way that we fix that is we just put both together, right? It's, would you rather? Yes, we would rather have both, because that is the depth, the full story of what God's up to. The centurion, you know, and again, I'm just picking out a few characters here. I'm almost done with that. Matter of fact, the centurion will be the last one. The centurion appears in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, not John. The centurion in Mark, though, says something that he does not say in the other. He talks in all of these stories, but what he says in Mark is distinct, and it's really clear in what he says how paradoxical, how either or, no, both and, who Jesus is. The centurion says from the Greek in Mark, and I quote this, this human being was the Son of God. This human being, Son of God, together. So, you know, John is so clear that this is the Son of God, and that story has to be appreciated. Mark is so clear that he's a human being. Mark is so clear why God needs to come to us, because we're confused. John is so clear on how he comes to us. We need both these stories, the centurion, this human being, Son of God, both at the same time, and that is great theology. That's the way we explain Jesus, fully God, fully human. We need John, we need Mark, we need them both, and so we're pivoting between the two, and this is a big time of year. We're hoping that you're in church a lot so that you get both pivots and not either or, one or the other. The centurion says this human being was the Son of God. So yeah, we like them, they both sit together. That he says was shows that he's not quite all the way there, because not only was he the Son of God, in his death and in his resurrection, he is now and will always be the Son of God come in glory. And so, wow, what a way to get to that whenever you put all these stories together, right? So when you have John by himself, you get this story of like, could this be Jesus so dedicated to his mission that he's almost different from us, that it'd be hard to identify with him. I'm going to use the word aloof. He's almost like still so godlike that he's not, there would be a gap between him and us. Like, you know, you stand next to him and he just radiates because he's there in his glory, and that's almost got this aloof feel. He's so powerful, he's different than us. In Mark, if you had just Mark, you would get this sort of broken, confused humanity, but you might not get the gift of what it's being bestowed by this powerful, present Jesus. When you put the two together, you get this full, powerful presence of God, who Jesus comes and his grace covers all of our confusion. And now you get the full story. And you only get that when the answer is yes, both and. So there, for how long the text is, that was a pretty quick rip through it. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on every verse, because if I do this for too much time to begin with, if I did every verse, this would be a 45-hour video probably, you know, like I would go on and on. I will sort of cut this here. I've hit that hard enough that it's both and we're entering into such a glorious season. If you followed along with preparing and you've moved through the lectionary, you get a picture of who Jesus is, you get a picture of who we are, you get a picture of what we get redeemed from, and you get a picture of what the redemption gives us. And now you have a picture that is so deep of God's work, all right? This Sunday, even though it's not a week of Lent, I'm going to wrap up these sort of Lenten themes. I'm going to give you self-control instead of indulgence. That's going to be what we talk about. So indulgence is this sort of me, all about me. It's standing by the comfort of the fire while Jesus is under fire, and then self-control instead of that. Every one of the things that we've thrown away has been a sort of bad habit, digital habit, a problem of the modern world. Everything we've thrown it away for has been a fruit of the Spirit. This one is self-control. So every time I've said, hey, less of this and more of this week I'm saying less indulgence, more self-control. It's a fruit of the Spirit. I'm trying to say less of this and more fruit of this fruit of the Spirit. Lent is a season where we hear this brokenness in Mark, and we hear that God redeems us, and now we get to live into some of these different habits. We're not going to be perfect. Last week I was like, I'm not even going to throw away the despair, because despair is always going to be part of who we are. So, I'm not saying you're redeeming yourself. I'm saying to be the person who gets this both and from God for us means you get to try to live into these other things, and we're going to try to live into self-control. I had an idea for the sermon for weeks, and I'm starting to waver on that idea. I even told people in Sunday school, hey, here's the idea, and now I'm kind of being like, I might put that idea in there, but I have this sort of weirder idea, and we'll see if I can pull it together. That it's just going to be a bunch of weird facts thrown together. We'll see if I can pull that off. I have a fun, what I think would be a fun thing to try to do. We'll see if I can do it. So that's where we'll go Sunday. At the end of the day, these have all been fruit of the Spirit, and this one, even though it's not really Lent, it's Passion Sunday, is about self-control. Jesus goes to great lengths to come down from heaven, to come into our midst in his glory, and to meet these broken, confused people like you and I, and to say, you don't have to say, would you rather have a good day today or a good day tomorrow? You can be covered with grace that is the granting of a good day. And by good day, I don't mean things always go your way. I mean the attitude, the confidence that you are God's own, and the good day of that can be today, tomorrow, and every day, and that's what we're given in Christ. So I've just covered some of the juxtaposition between Mark and Luke, Mark and John. I've just covered a lot of the text quickly for Sunday, and I've talked some about where we've been in the season of Lent, and I've previewed the sermon a lot. So if you're keeping up, way to go. Thanks for joining me. I'm so glad that people make use of these. This is a text study that I hope helps. That helps give some information and lets you know that this stuff is really in there, even if I don't always say it during the sermon. All right? So I'm looking forward to Gathering Sunday. Passion Sunday is up there, is one of my sort of favorite observances, and Holy Week is awesome in terms of the message we get from God, not ultimately having to face our brokenness, but the message we hear in Holy Week. And then, I think what makes Easter is hearing what God has to fix. What makes Easter so powerful is to hear the work that God does, but to enter into Passion Sunday well is to hear what gets erased in Jesus' resurrection. It's a thing we can't erase ourselves. God does all this work for us, and Passion Sunday, Holy Week, and Easter are all about hearing again how much God loves us and how much God has done for us. So thanks for joining me. I'm looking forward to Sunday, and I'm hopeful that you're there. It's a sort of almost tippity top of the mountain type Sunday, and I hope to see you then. Stay safe between now and then, and I'm looking forward to it. See you soon.